Hello again, my friends. This is part 3 in a series of videos on how I forecast for clients, what I actually do when a client gives me their birth information and I'm doing the forecasting part of the analysis. And in this part 3, I'm going to talk more about timeline format, the timeline format that we use in forecasting. I talked about it in the previous part in the series, part 2. I'm going to continue with some more interesting details about it in this third part of this series. And what we're focusing on now is the actual interpretation, details about how we think about this, because getting the exact feeling for it makes such a difference. If you stick to the meanings of the planets and what's going on, it's just like a laser focus that hits the essential key things and just really makes sense to the client. Okay, this is our experience in applying the ideas that are confirmed by the database research. In the database research, we can see that certain correlations, connections happen. When you apply it with clients, it becomes alive, and you get these feelings and understanding about what's actually going on with the person. So the database research, the modern research methods, and then the application with clients is very synergistic. It's like, wow, it gives you the, really understanding it. And so here we're focusing on what happens in the client experience, applying these things where we see that midpoints are involved in accidents. It really works. Now we get to, now I'm sharing how we experience that with clients. So let me tell you a few more things about this timeline format. We're going to continue talking about transit-to-natal. And in the previous video in this series, in part 2, I was talking about interpreting these planets that station on midpoints and how powerful they are. Another thing I want to mention related to this is you can have a transiting midpoint to a natal planet. So you have transiting planet to natal midpoint, such as we discussed at the end of the previous video, transiting Pluto, conjunct or opposition the Venus-Neptune midpoint. Maybe I should give you a quick visualization of exactly what we're talking about. Let me go ahead and do that. Well, let's do it. Let's see where is Pluto on, let's pick any date, December 10. And well, let's do both of them. Where is Pluto on August 7? Where is it on December 10? Well, I can look at a text ephemeris. I can pull up a chart wheel. Either way works. Let me just pull up a chart wheel. Kind of makes it very concrete and what we're all accustomed to looking at chart wheels. I'm going to do a chart for August 7 and one for December 10. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to add a chart, and I'll just say August 7. And this will be for August 7, 2023. The time doesn't matter because Pluto moves so slow anyway. And I'll just do it for 12 noon on August 7. Now I'm going to do another chart for, what did I say, December 10? Can I drag this down? Yeah, I can. December 10. I just want to make it clear what is actually happening in the sky. And most of you are probably familiar with this, but it doesn't hurt to look at it again. And so here is the chart wheel for August 7. And where is Pluto? It's at 28 degrees, 45 minutes of Capricorn. Where is it on December 10? It is 28 degrees, 44 minutes of Capricorn, 1 minute difference. Well, actually, Pluto moves 1 minute a day typically. So at some point during this day, it's the same position. So let me show you that. If I do a chart adjust and I go, say, 8 hours later, 8 hours later, I've got 12 Capricorn, Pluto at 12 Capricorn 44, and 8 hours later, Pluto is at 12 Capricorn 45. Exactly the same position as on August 7th. So sometime during the day of December 10 and August 7, Pluto is exactly at the same position. 28 Capricorn 45, because Pluto was going retrograde, crossed the 28 Capricorn 45, turned direct, and crossed it again. Now, the timeline is saying, let me go back to it. It's so fast to go back to things. Just click on the chart, the person you're interested, click on the report, the timeline, and you're back. And it's Venus-Neptune midpoint. So that means my Venus-Neptune midpoint must be 28 Cancer 45, maybe 44. Something like that, because Pluto is opposition. Let's see if that's true. I didn't double check before I made this video. I'm going to be confused and embarrassed if it isn't. Let's see. So I've got my chart up here. I'm going to go to midpoints, select view change settings, and I'm going to check this option to see the listing of the actual midpoints in addition to the trees. And I'm going to go down to 28 Cancer 45 and see if the Venus-Neptune midpoint is there. So here's the list: Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, 28 Cancer 45. I love when things work. So there it is. The Venus-Neptune midpoint is at 28 Cancer 45. So if you look at a chart wheel, let's just pull up a pop-up wheel. Venus is at 14 Taurus, Neptune is at 13 Libra. Well, actually you can tell that the midpoint is going to be, it's going to be about 28, 29, well, it's not that obvious, but it will be 28 or 29 degrees of Cancer right in here. Okay, so that is what we are looking at. When we look at this timeline format, all of this is calculated, graphed, presented to us very nicely, and now we can just go in and just think about what these planets are doing and get the interpretation. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you is, I started to say, is that you can have transiting midpoint to natal planet. Let's go down to this one. Transiting Jupiter-Uranus midpoint. Remember, slash means midpoint. Transiting Jupiter-Uranus midpoint. How do I know it's transit? Because transit is the thing on the left. It is conjunct natal Venus. Right here in late November, and then again in early February, we can see that the midpoint, now this is interesting, the midpoint is retrograde in November, December. If you take the speed of Jupiter, maybe it's retrograde, maybe it's direct, you take the speed of Uranus, when you take the midpoint itself, the midpoint is retrograde. And then the transiting midpoint turns direct and becomes exact again. And here's another one up here, transiting Saturn-Uranus midpoint, opposition natal Neptune in early September. And this time, it lasts a long time. The midpoint is retrograde, and it appears to be very slowly retrograde, probably speeding up, getting faster and faster retrograde towards the end, because it takes it, the lead-up time to it is longer than the leaving time. So Saturn-Uranus midpoint, opposition Neptune, that's a nasty combination. Very often, people that are mentally unstable can have problems at these times, because Saturn-Uranus is very disturbing, and it disturbs our dreams, our visions, what we want out of life. What's our fantasy? Like, what is our rainbow out there? Like, what do we really dream about? What dream do we want to make real? Maybe you want to be an astrological counselor and therapist. Like, that would be the most totally awesome, beautiful, magnificent thing. Maybe whatever it is. And Saturn-Uranus disrupts things. It makes you go off on your own and split away. So splitting away, going off on one's own vision. So anyway, that's how we interpret it. Now, right now, I don't know the difference between a transiting planet. I don't know the difference in meaning, is what I meant to say. I don't know how to interpret transiting planet to natal midpoint different from transiting midpoint to natal planet. There must be a difference, because I don't know what that difference is right now. So I just interpret them the same way. Some of you may have some ideas about that. You can share it if you've seen consistent things with clients. We certainly don't have any evidence from our controlled research studies on distinguishing them. Okay, so I wanted to mention that. You have transiting midpoint to natal planet, transiting planet to natal midpoint. Same thing with progressions. You have a progressed planet to natal midpoint, and you have a progressed midpoint to natal planet. And they seem to work in a very similar way. I mean, they definitely work in a similar way. There must be some difference, but we don't know what it is. Okay, so going through the details, when you're looking at this, here's an interesting one. And you see Saturn-Pluto midpoint, opposition Pluto. Is it important? And what is it really telling us? You should know the answer now. Yes, it is important. It's saying that the transiting Saturn-Pluto midpoint is opposition natal Pluto. So that's important. Okay, now let me look at my list. I think I know what the next thing I want to cover is, but let me verify from the PowerPoint. Yeah, I want to show you this. I've got 3 points I want to make here. This first one is not something that comes up very often, but let me show it to you. It's a very curious thing. The very first thing in my forecast, it says Neptune-Pluto equals Neptune-Pluto. Okay, the left is the transit, the right is natal. Transiting Neptune-Pluto equals natal Neptune-Pluto. What does it mean, Neptune-Pluto equals Neptune-Pluto? What it's saying, it's, just saying it very briefly with just the planets. What it's indicating is that the distance between transiting Neptune and Pluto in the sky is the same as when I was born. Now, I was born a long time ago, so Neptune and Pluto move slowly. That seems maybe a little odd that the distance is the same as when I was born. And I want to show you something interesting about this. It becomes exact in mid to late July. Here, I went back to the previous thing and I saw it didn't become exact. Becomes exact in mid to late July. And let me show you something. I was curious about this. This is a little bit of an aside from the normal things you can do with clients, but it's interesting. Let me show you this. I went into the Graphic Ephemeris. So you go to Forecast and you select Graphic Ephemeris. And let me bring up, I changed the settings. The Graphic Ephemeris does all kinds of cool things. And unless you watch these videos, these tutorial videos on forecasting, or you tinker around with the program, you probably wouldn't know there's all these cool things you can do. And one of the things you can do is you can graph the distance between the planets. So what this is showing, I ran this from 1945 to 2035. I ran it for 90 years. 90 years. I wanted to catch the current year, 2023, and a little bit into the future. So it's kind of arbitrary dates. I wanted to run it for a long time period, so I just ran it for 90 years. Neptune and Pluto have been sextile each other for 90 years. 90, oh, actually over 100 years, because I'm just showing the 90 years here. For 100 years, within, say, about a 10-degree orb or so, something like that, within about a 10-degree orb, Neptune and Pluto have been sextile. That means Neptune is moving just as fast as Pluto. And what happens is Pluto has a very eccentric orbit, means it's like thin and long, and it speeds up and slows down. And when Pluto is in Scorpio, it's moving its fastest. And when Pluto is moving its fastest in Scorpio, it's the same speed as Neptune. So while Pluto was going through like Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sag, Capricorn, over the last 100 years or so, it's remained in a sextile to Pluto. So this is showing the distance between Neptune and Pluto. And over here it says 60, 0, 30, 60. So in January 1945, it was a little bit less than 60 degrees. Then, if we go down here, it says 1967, a little more than 60 degrees, because this horizontal line is exactly 60. Up here, in 2005, it's less than 60. Actually, went all the way back to 51 to 52 degrees, which is a sextile. This is when Neptune and Pluto moved into a sextile aspect. They were also in sextile in 1945, when it was up around that 52 degrees as well. And then Neptune and Pluto are now moving back into an exact sextile around 2023. So they sit there. Now, if I go 90 years into the future, Pluto starts slowing down. So Pluto slows down and Neptune separates from Pluto. So I'm going to click this right arrow to see the next 90 years. And now it's no longer sitting around 60. All of a sudden, the distance between Neptune and Pluto from 2035 to 2125 goes from 60 to, what is this? About 160. So it's no longer horizontal. So Neptune and Pluto for about 100 years will remain about the same distance from each other, and then they separate. So if I go back to the graph we have from 1945 to 2035, this is the distance between Neptune and Pluto, remains close to 60 degrees. If I go 90 years to the previous 90 years, we see the same thing where in 1945, it's close to that 60 degrees, but as you go back in time, Neptune and Pluto were conjunct. They were at 0. It looks like around 1891, maybe 1892. Right in there, Neptune and Pluto were conjunct. So my point is that Pluto speeds up when it's near Scorpio and it becomes just as fast as Neptune. Then when Pluto goes into Taurus, it's very slow and Neptune is going way faster. It's interesting. Here's the interesting thing. Let me go back to the current time period. It's only in time periods like this where you could have a Neptune-Pluto come to the same angular distance that it was at birth. And that's what's happening to me, going back to the main series program, on July 22nd of next year. On July 22nd, 2024, the distance between Neptune and Pluto returns back to exactly what it was when I was born. This happened to Donald Trump when he ran for president. So when he ran for president and won, what was that, about 7 years ago, whatever it was. His Neptune, he had the same thing that I'm having. The Neptune-Pluto came into the same distance. And that's one reason why I predicted he would do so well in the election, that he would win the primary, and I predicted he might even win the election, even though everybody, both conservatives and liberals, said he wouldn't. It wasn't the main reason, but when the Neptune-Pluto angle is the same as at birth, it gives you this extra like charisma and power and influence. And so I will have that next summer. And it's an age thing. Anybody around the same age will have it around the same time. Okay, anyway, it was an interesting thing that happens where, like, when you're 50, 60, 70 years old, Neptune and Pluto could come back to where they were when you were born. In the future, that won't happen. But for people alive today, it happens. Okay. Now, there's a few more things I want to mention that I have on my PowerPoint. I want to talk this same phase angle. And this leads to exactly to the next point, which is this. When you look at this forecast, which of these aspects is the most powerful? Which of them is the most important? Well, I mentioned in the previous video that when a planet stations and stays within orb for a long time, that sets a very, very powerful impact. So I mentioned transiting Pluto on my Venus-Neptune midpoint. Transiting Pluto on my Saturn-Uranus midpoint sets a very strong theme in the life. This Uranus at Moon-Mars, very strong theme through August and September. It's more compressed and more intense because Uranus doesn't get that far out of orb. It stays close. And you can tell how close it is by how dark the line is. See, this transiting Uranus remains a dark red from August to September. It means the orb is small. Here it gets very thin. It gets pale. This means Uranus and my moon Mars is hitting me hard through August and September. Uranus and moon Mars means you're impatient. You got to get things done. You want to get them done now. You're fired up. You're feeling like you're ready to take things on. You want to compete. So Uranus at moon Mars. Okay, and I wanted to show you. Look at this one. Transiting Pluto conjunct my Jupiter, exact in mid-March. Does get thin in the middle. It comes back in June 20. So that's often leads to being very influential, which is a nice thing to have. Okay, so the ones that are the most important, when the stations happen. Another thing, the 4 planet combinations. We've seen these are extremely powerful. There are 3 kinds of 4 planet combinations. There is the same phase angle when you see equals. There are 3 kinds. There's also midpoint to midpoint and composite. Now what I'm going to do, well, here's a composite. Between my progressed and my natal, whoa, this is interesting. I actually didn't know this. I don't look at my chart enough. Oh, we have examples of all 3 kinds here with my progressed to natal. In my progressed to natal, this is the secondary progression to my natal. In the composite chart of the progressed chart and the natal chart, Venus is conjunct Uranus, exact on December 3rd. Whoa, I didn't realize that. That's interesting. Venus is conjunct Uranus on December 3rd. The evidence so far is that the composite is the strongest thing that can happen. It's stronger than a planet-to-planet conjunction, if you can believe that. It is the strongest thing that can happen. So that means that Venus-Uranus, this excitability is very strong. I've been thinking I'm going to start playing my guitar more, and it's just like rock and roll, man. Being youthful and alive and feeling excited, like in love with life kind of feeling. So this is very strong. Late November, early December it peaks. And the progressions are slow, so they last, easily 3 months or more leading up to it, and then after that. So my point is this: there are 3 kinds of these 4 planet combinations. A composite actually involves 4 planets. I've made other videos on what this means. It means that the progressed Venus to natal Uranus angle is the same as progressed Venus to natal Uranus is the same as progressed Uranus to natal Venus. There's this whole big resonance is what I'm looking for. A whole big resonance thing going on. I describe that in other videos. So there are 3 kinds. There's the composite, there's the same phase angle, it'll say equals, and then there's midpoint to midpoint. And here you see the Jupiter-Uranus midpoint conjunct. This is the progressed Jupiter-Uranus midpoint conjunct the natal Jupiter-Uranus midpoint, and the progressed Jupiter-Saturn midpoint conjunct the natal Jupiter-Saturn midpoint. But notice the color hardly changes over a year. It looks almost the same color. That means it's lasting for so long, probably 10, 20, 30 years, that I don't give any attention to it. It's just, maybe I should, but I just don't know how to deal with that right now. So even though it's there, if you don't see the color changing, like here you see it changing. Progressed Sun conjunct the Mars-Neptune midpoint on January 9, 2024, and you see it building up. That means in late 2023 and early 2024, that will be strong. So those are the 3 kinds of 4 planet patterns. The composite is the strongest, and the same phase angle and the midpoint to midpoint, we're going to guess they're about the same, almost as strong as a composite. But they have a very specially powerful effect. The planets to midpoints, midpoints to planets, also very powerful. And conjunctions and oppositions, very powerful. And then I really just look at trine, sextiles, and squares otherwise. And there's a whole other way we forecast, which I'm going to show you as well, to pick up the vibrational things. So I'm going to show you that in a later video in this series. So this is one part of the forecasting, and then there's another part I'm going to show you. Okay, so where are we now? We're almost at a half hour, and I think there might be one more thing I want to say in this video, and then we'll go on to the next one, PowerPoint. Right, the difference between transits and progressions. Let me pick up with that in the next video in the series, be the 4th video. I'm going to talk about transits versus progressions, and then I'm going to show you, in the next video, I'm going to show you, talk a little bit about the difference between transits and progressions, and so on. And also how I take the notes. This is the important part that I mentioned at the introduction to this. The preparation. So I'm talking about how we interpret and everything. Then I'm going to show you how I take notes and I'm ready for my client. I'm going to do all that in the next video, and then there'll probably be even one more after that. Okay, so thank you very much, my friends, for being members, for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next video in the series. God bless. Namaste.